I'm reading hymn number 22. Dear weaver of our life's design, whose patterns all obey, with skillful fingers gently guide the sturdy threads that will survive the tangle of our days. Take up the fabric of our lives with hands that gently hold. Bind in the ragged edge that care would sunder and that pain would tear, and mend our raveling souls. Let eyes that in the plainest cloth a hidden beauty see discern in us our richest hues. Show us the patterns we may use to set our spirits free.
It's always so great to look out. It's really, if you haven't had that opportunity, you should do it sometime. It's pretty great. So to begin with, I want to thank Lorraine Sandoval-Vigil for encouragement to participate in the sermon writing class, and to Bob and Carolyn for being the best classmates on this journey. We all want to be remembered. We have that in common. People and culture seek permanence to say, we were here, we are here. This is a story of the human record where there are always more questions than answers. It's also a personal journey. While I was still working, I was awarded a sabbatical for a semester. For my school, that involved submitting a detailed plan on how I would improve myself. One thing on my list was taking an undergraduate class at UCSC, partly as redemption from my very underwhelming and very long ago college career. I signed up for a class called Art and Politics, which was rather poorly taught, yet left a huge impression on me. The theme was how and why things are memorialized in historic, cultural, or artistic contexts. Ironic, really, that a class so marginal made such a lasting imprint on me and added to how I see myself, my community, and to a large extent, the world around me. And that continues. How did I get so hooked? How did I find this place where the creation and building of memorials deepened my understanding of humanity in such a profound way? The final exam in my sabbatical class was either a long research paper or build your own monument kind of activity. I immediately went for the latter. And that's when it started, my fascination about monuments and their significance. What is important to people as individuals and also their communities as told by these structures? We're at a place in time when we're questioning what's always been around us. Monument is based on the word to remember, and indeed we must. Monument, certainly more than stone. They permanently, that is, if anything is really permanent, tell our stories, the good and the bad. Stories are how we are known, individually and collectively. Oftentimes, after wars, enormous statues are erected to symbolize some grandeur or outcome or perceived hero. These structures of marble, bronze, steel, concrete often make a statement about war dead, heroic ventures, military valor, and tyranny. For a time, that seemed like enough and how it was supposed to be. But there are always new perspectives. Things change. Even Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite and an armaments developer, said, "I would rather take care of the stomachs of the living than the glory of the departed in the form of monuments." What commemorates our history is being examined with a new framework. What happens when monuments no longer represent the values of society? That is a question posed by Susan Ives, an intrepid news journalist who curates poems and images about monuments and their place in the world. In her work, she explores the relationship between the landscape and civic memory. When the Soviet Union collapsed, statues of Lenin were pulled down all over the Soviet bloc. In the US, we have removed statues to Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and others. In the American South, statues commemorating the Civil War are looked at anew, even if they reflect a specific period of romanticized and racially divisive times. In California, the Mission Bells, a memorial in their own right, are seen by many as a commemoration of genocide and enslavement. Tear them down, leave them up, add to them, learn about them. It's all been done, but what is the message for any of these actions? This discussion is one of the most culturally fraught conversations we can have and seems to show how we visually represent our history as both interpretive and flawed, or as changeable for that matter. Monuments can also be rallying points for a community. Can some monuments inspire us to be a little bolder and act a little more courageously? In Santa Cruz, we have a town clock, which is the site of many protests and civil demonstrations. We have a Black Lives Matter mural, which was created and painted with a lot of community participation, but has been vandalized twice. Read into that what you will. Every town has a statue or monument commemorating something. Sometimes they're a point of pride and other times they're a source of conflict. Oftentimes they sit in neglected parts of a park or are so ubiquitous that no one knows what it represents any longer. When was the last time you took a look at an old statue near you and read the plaque beneath? But these structures are also transformative and reveal something about what we as a community hold up. Think of the Vietnam Memorial, where a wall and lists of names transformed a national perception about a war. Why did this structure strike such a chord, even if it and its architect, Maya Lin, were reviled when it was first opened to the public? But she understood how to represent emotion and has said about another of her works that it is revealing things we may not be thinking about. How powerful is that? Monuments can then pull something out of ourselves that we may be unaware of. She goes on to say, if any art form, anything gets us to take a moment's pause and look at something afresh, that's got to be a good thing. Think of places you've been when the power of a commemorative structure transformed you even for a moment. People are drawn to the wall because it doesn't prescribe how one is to feel or think, but rather allows space to just be and resonate with the stories of tragic loss. When I was in Germany this past summer, there were monuments and memorials everywhere, some so powerful that they would make me weep and still sit heavy on my heart. In fact, I'm going back next week to have another look. Most were simple, most allowed the individual to bring their own sensibility to be revealed. One in particular in Berlin was a memorial to the European Jews murdered in the Holocaust. This one memorial is a vast acreage of dark granite slabs of varying heights arranged in rows. No words, no names, no information, nothing. Yet this place conveyed such power and emotion. It pulled off the layers often hidden in explanations to just be a raw, emotional, devastatingly personal place. I still think about being there. It changed me. I feel that this is the quintessential and universal piece, totally there to experience, to feel, to reflect, to be. So what is it about the power of certain structures to soothe the soul, justify outcomes, or even validate a contentious history? Statues and monuments have been built from time immemorial to document victory in battles, but to also document the times. Many Confederate monuments, for example, were built long after the Civil War, almost like thumbing the collective nose to the rest of the nation. Here, the victor did not control the narrative. Whole segments of the population, the African American citizens, for example, were not given a voice in how these public works were thought of, designed, and built. And here we are, marginalized then and often marginalized now. Even when these memorials are being dismantled, it really says more about how we want to change the physical representation without bothering to understand the full story or context. Does out of sight, out of mind work? Because there's no longer a statue of Christopher Columbus in this town square, does that mean we have come to terms with what he did or represented? Is that an essential need of commemoration to put a spotlight on selective truths? A nonprofit group called the Monument Lab has done an extensive study of monuments in the United States. While the findings aren't surprising, they are nonetheless shocking. Their research conveys the hidden truth about what we commemorate, what is our collective memory, and what we hold up to be important at any given time. For example, there are more statues to mermaids than women in Congress. There are 1,221 monuments to peace and 15,758 to war. Of the top 50 memorials of people in the US, 88% are white men. Half of them were slave owners. Only 6% represent women and 10% Black or Indigenous people. Does this tell the whole story of what we are about as a country? Is this the story we want to intentionally tell? Is this how we are to be remembered? Yet there may be a shift in how we reckon with this public representation of people, events, and history. It seems like monuments are less literal and more interactive. Reflective pools at the 9/11 memorial, empty chairs at a site of a mass shooting, the AIDS quilt spread out, the Vietnam memorial offering crevices and texture for rubbings and leaving mementos allow us, in fact, encourages us to create our own meaning, even if the context is horrific. It's the creative process that provides a canvas for individuals to find their own interpretations. These structures then become dynamic works and even more emotionally impactful. In a sense, Unitarians have our chalice as a monument to both our history and what we hold dear. A chalice contains light. It is a supportive, comforting shape. It is unifying. It can even mean different things to different people. So given that understanding of something we're all familiar with as Unitarians, what would your own monument look like? What would be the story you would want made permanent? What would people looking at your monument feel about you or understand about you? Would you be perched on a horse, or would there be space for symbolism and interpretation? How would your monument reveal your inner beautiful life and what you stand for? Consider for a moment as you build your monument what it would be if it wasn't a thing, but more of a space where you just are, a memorial without a structure per se. The poet William E. Stafford wrote in his poem, "At the unnational monument along the Canadian border, that true commemoration can just be." What a precious perspective. His short poem goes, "This is the field where the battle did not happen, where the unknown soldier did not die. This is the field where grass joined hands, where no monument stands, and the only heroic thing is the sky. Birds fly here without any sound, unfolding their wings across the open. No people killed or were killed on this ground, hallowed by neglect and an air so tame that people celebrate it by forgetting its name. A structure, a space, a place, it all can work." So back to my build a monument activity for my sabbatical class there. This evolved as due to many creative projects. I ended up building a layered textile bag with each cloth strip presenting a written piece based on interviews with 7 people of varying ages and experiences. These unique stories revealed the rich narrative of every person juxtaposed with another. I then lined the bag with this yummy green velvet cloth. My thought then and now was that this shows the sweetness that lies inside all of us. It can be hidden. It may only peek out now and then, but inner richness is often at our core. An unplanned element was that this bag was unstructured, so the bands folded over on each other. It showed me that our stories are intertwined and come together when allowed. It wasn't planned, but became that happy accident. Some of the people I interviewed were long-time dear friends, and others were fellow students in my class. All the stories became one, a common story of our history and hopes. My fabric bag reminds me that beauty, truth, and grace do lie within, and that stories are always powerful, holy almost. Those are my values. I realize that it's the stories that are permanent, even as physical structures and contexts change. When I look at my bag monument, I am reminded of the people involved, the process involved, and what I want it to say about my understanding of this changeable world. These are my takeaways. Structures are temporary. A true monument, stable and true as it has been throughout time, holds up people and events in meaningful yet evolving ways. And so we honor our stories, we honor our spaces, we honor our history, and there are always more questions and answers. So grace or granite, which will it be?